So let's have a look at FHIR Shorthand or FHIR. There's a link there that'll take you to more information about FHIR, but really what is it? If we think about implementation guides, so the guides that we look at to understand specific profiles, or we look at the base FHIR specification, it gives us examples on what resources we can send to a particular FHIR implementation or use for a particular FHIR implementation. We can also see the structure. So if we've created a profile that's based on the AU base as an example, we'll see the various aspects of the AU base and any sort of profiles that we've added to it. So the implementation guides can get created in a number of ways. So one way is to manually handcraft all the artifacts that make up the implementation guide, and then we use the IG publisher to generate the various web pages and artifacts for that particular deliverable. Another way is a spreadsheet method, which is quite valid, and a number of the existing profiles that are out in the wild have been developed using that method. The challenge with that method is that it's not very easy to maintain through source control because it is in a spreadsheet. This is where FHIR really comes into its own, in that it is just a shorthand code that we're writing, and it can be edited with any text editor, and you can put it into source control and manage those changes nicely in there. One great implementation I've seen recently is the New Zealand base FHIR specification, which has been done solely with FHIR, and it's a great example of what can be done with FHIR. So a warning, like most of FHIR, there's a plethora of FHIR related puns. There's also a plethora of FHIR or FHIR shorthand puns. So Sushi is the compiler, which will take your FHIR code and turn it into the artifacts ready for the publisher. The Go FHIR takes an existing implementation guide and creates the FHIR code from it. So yeah, lots of puns to look out for. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by creating a Sushi project. So I'll show you links in a minute that you can download all of these components, but the application that we're going to use is Sushi, and we do an init to generate a new project for us. It'll step us through the prompts that we need to answer to generate our guide. So let's create it. I'm going to create a test IG, FHIR.test. Just going to put in some dummy examples here. Okay, so what we get from that particular command is we get an input folder, and in the input folder, it's where our FHIR code will start to go. So when you do that init, it'll create an example for you, so you can see what it looks like. So let's have a look at this FHIR file that got generated for us as part of the initialization. It gives you a sample file that we can start to edit. You'll see some comments here in the green. We've got a profile, which is my patient, and we've got an instance. An instance is just an example that we want to use for this particular profile. So we can give the profile a name. So my patient's the name of the profile. We've got a parent being patient resource. Because of my configuration of Sushi, this is linking back to the global R4 patient resource. It's got the description here, and we're constraining name to be a mandatory field, and it's got the must support flag set. So just an example of a particular profile. And then the instance, it's an instance of the My Patient profile. We give it a description and we set some fields. So we're just going to edit, or I'm just going to edit the file and just show you some of the things you can do with FHIR. So first of all, I'm going to add a gender for our patient. Given that his name's James Pond, I'll make him a male. The hash male is the code, so used when we're linking to code data types. There's also codable concepts that you can put in a similar fashion, but you can see that through the documentation. The other thing we're going to do is we're just going to put in some more description. So it's really important when we're creating these implementation guides to create a rich set of content for someone consuming it or reading it. So let's put in a purpose. There's a few ways that we can enter strings within FHIR. I find it easier to use the triple double, the three double exclamation, the exclamation marks. The reason for that is that you can do multi-line text and it just displays easier. So thanks for following. Sorry, I had to stick with the FHIR example. So this is going to appear inside our implementation guide, and you'll see how that looks. So I'm just going to save that file now. We can have multiple files within FHIR in a single project that we're creating, or you can place them in the one file. So it just depends on the way that you want to work. I find it easier if I've got the each individual profile separately and then extensions in their own examples by themselves, but it's completely up to you. So I've saved that. Let's go to the next step. So before we start generating the implementation guide, I just need to make sure that I've got the up-to-date publisher. So I just run update publisher. So now the publisher's up to date, I can run gen once to generate the implementation guide. So this is going to run sushi to compile our FHIR code, and it's going to generate the implementation guide. Great, so it's finished the generation of the implementation guide. So let's have a look at what we have got. So what you'll see now in the folder that we created for the implementation guide, besides the input and the input cache, we've got an output folder where it's put our implementation guide. So there's a number of artifacts there that it's copied over for us, and we're looking for the index.html, which is the implementation guide itself. So here's our implementation guide. It's really quite basic at the moment. We can configure the IG to look exactly the way that we want it to look, but just showing you what you can get out of the box without doing too much at all. So if we look at artifacts, it's got a couple of things for us. It's got the My Patient profile that we set up, and it's got our patient example. And you'll see here is the description that was in the FHIR file that we were creating. So going into the my patient profile, see a couple of things for starters. The text that I included at the top in the purpose. So you can really go to town here explaining everything about your particular profile. So yeah, definitely try and make it a rich experience for those consumers. If we look at the differential table, you'll remember that we did this in FHIR. We set name to be a mandatory field, and we set the must support flag, which is this S. You'll also notice that we have the whole content from the HR7 FHIR specification for the patient resource that this thing was based upon. So a consumer reading your implementation guide has access to what the thing looks like, including your constraints for that particular or your profile. Tells you all the bindings, and if you want to get into FHIR and change some of the bindings from, say, an example to be specific required values, you can do that within FHIR. So there's a wealth of information there from within a few lines of FHIR code. So very, very powerful. We've got a link to our patient example here, and we can see the content of the patient example with the gender that I populated and that name, James Pond. It generates the XML and JSON for you, as well as the turtle example. You can configure within the IG publisher as to which you get, but it's pretty easy to set up these artifacts and really get cracking on implementing a rich implementation guide for your consumers. So now time for a few links. Definitely go to fishschool.org. This is where you'll download the Sushi application, the Go Fish application, but also that second link there is where you can start to see some other templates that you can use within FHIR to really get you started very quickly. So definitely recommend going there and seeing some sample code for yourself and really understanding what options you might have to use. You can certainly go back to the spec and you'll find the spec listed on that side as well. I used VS Code for my example today. There's a great plugin for FHIR in VS Code. So if you're using that editor, definitely download that. The IG publisher, I included the link. Even though we're not manually running the IG publisher, it is run by that gen once command that we issued. And there's some great information in that part of the spec around how you can configure the IG to really suit the needs of the implementation guide you're building. Even things like the branding, the colors that you might want to use to make it fresh for your consumers. So what I will say is that definitely go to those links, learn a lot more about FHIR, and start writing your implementation guides using FHIR. It's a great way of developing that documentation and giving something to consumers that they're used to reading from a FHIR specification point of view. And just try out those templates to see what information you can add to those implementation guides. Happy fishing.